Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, looking at elevating fan experiences with analytics. A quick run through of the agenda. Intro. So I'm Zach. I'm an account manager here at Relative Insight. I work with a bunch of our customers and specifically our sports customers in both the US and Europe. I'll be taking you through a quick introduction to Relative Insight, the world of CSAT and NPS reporting, and the importance of customer and fan journey mapping, and how Relative Insight can support organizations with getting value and insight out of their customer or fan experience data. I'll then be handing over to Greg Emmons, who is the business analytics manager at Arizona Sun Devils. And at the end, as I mentioned at the top of the call, we'll have some time for Q&As and we'll open the floor. So just to reiterate, any questions that you guys have, there should be a little Q&A ribbon at the bottom of your screen. That's where you can type in any questions you have throughout the presentation. And then at the end of the session, we'll be going through those and answering them. So yeah, that is the plan for today's call. Everything will be recorded. All the attendees that are live now will also receive kind of a post-webinar pack with the slides, with some additional content. But still feel free to take notes as we go through. Cool. So a quick background to Relative Insight for those. This might be your first time kind of engaging with us or seeing Relative Insight. So we are a text analytics company. Our mission is to elevate text analytics to provide business value to sports teams and brands across the world. We actually have quite an interesting backstory. So, Relative Insight originated in law enforcement. Our founders developed a system that could analyze unstructured text and pick out unique differences in the ways different people or groups spoke through the power of comparative linguistics. Now, through comparison and benchmarking live conversation online versus known language from verified children, our tool could unearth subtle differences in language and see where someone wasn't a 14-year-old chatting online, but was in fact a 40-year-old man doing a very sophisticated impression and kind of masquerading online. So of course, we're really proud of that history and that link to law enforcement, and all of that great work still goes on today up at the University of Lancaster. But naturally, what we found was that there was a business application for that comparative technology. And now today, what we do is we help our customers and fan experience teams analyze their unstructured data to help them understand the why behind movements in scores like NPS and CSAT. So I mentioned CSAT and NPS there. Now, I'm sure we're all kind of familiar with those phrases, what that is, and love it or hate it, it's sort of everywhere at this point. You know, almost every brand or organization runs a voice of customer or fan engagement survey of some kind, tracking those satisfaction metrics. But one of the major problems within that data is that it's often not useful by itself or in isolation. So you might have collected loads of really rich customer data. You've got your closed questions or metadata information, such as the customer's total spend or demographic information, their location, etc., alongside those satisfaction scores out of 10. You've also collected a bunch of hopefully really rich open-ended responses where you're asking your customer or your fan to explain why have they given you that NPS or CSAT score, kind of asking them to provide you with further context. But the issue with that is that you don't have a way to analyze all of that really rich, open-ended, unstructured data. So you have a few different options. One of those options is to manually read and classify those open ends yourself. Now, this is often paired with fairly outdated text analytics methods. Think word clouds or other frequency-based analysis. Of course, most insight and CX teams simply don't have the time to manually analyze all of those responses. So as a result, what we often see is organizations simply don't analyze that unstructured data that they've went through all that effort of collecting in the first place, but then they just simply don't have the resources or the ability to analyze it and get any use out of it. An option that we're increasingly seeing in today's world of AI, you know, AI is kind of everywhere. It's definitely taken off over the last kind of 2 years. But you might want to use a ChatGPT or other Gen AI-like tool to summarize what are people saying within that unstructured text. Now, one of the issues with that is that it lacks accuracy. It can create hallucinations in your data, but often, and more often than not, it leads to a loss of control of how your data is being used. So, with all of those options not really being ideal, that's where relative insight comes in. We give organizations the ability to understand why schools are going up or down by allowing you to analyze all of that unstructured data quickly, at scale, and with that scientific rigor using comparative methodologies. So, something that we've seen kind of becoming increasingly important across organizations is this idea of customer journey mapping. So I'm sure most of you are fairly familiar with that term, but to define what we mean by that, customer journey mapping is a visual representation of your customer's experience throughout their life cycle with your business. Customer journey mapping is becoming super important. We're seeing more businesses investing time and resources into developing these customer journey maps and breaking down all those different touch points that a customer might have when they engage with an organization or a business. What's really interesting, however, is that a recent study by IBM found that almost 47% or nearly 50% or half of all of the companies within the US that went through a customer journey mapping process then didn't make any meaningful change in the following 12 months after putting together that journey map. So that could tell us one of two things. It's either that those organizations are getting it perfectly right, which seems unlikely, or they're not learning anything actionable from the process, and they're likely not walking away with any actions because they lack the tools or the insight to make those necessary changes. So what we see is that many people are viewing customer journey mapping as the finish line, a one and done process rather than a tool for continuous improvement. And at Relative Insight, we really see customer journey mapping as the catalyst for business enhancement. So every step along that customer journey, you'll have data points associated with it. Lots of that data will be quant-based, touched on that earlier, but also qual-based. And it's that qual data where there's lots of nuggets of customer insight that people are currently not tapping into. Another thing that we see within the literature around customer journey mapping is this concern around oversimplification. So, for example, if you take customer care as one of those many touch points, within that, I guess, segment of customer care, there's a whole bunch of different human behaviors, emotional context, buying signals, decision-making criteria that exist all within just that one category. Without some way of deep diving into all of that and understanding your data, you're risking losing all of that nuance and actionable intelligence. So the importance of analysis alongside customer journey mapping is to make sure that it's a dynamic tool that's being used to help you continuously improve your customer or fan experiences rather than a one and done process. So how does relative insight actually work? How do we feed into this idea of customer journey mapping and all those multiple different touch points? So on the left-hand side, what you've got is three example categories of customer data that a typical business might have access to. So customer experience, voice of customer, or customer journey mapping data. In terms of what that could more specifically be, it might be things, as we said before, things like surveys, chatbot transcript interactions. It could even be customer interviews or focus groups. All of those could be transcribed. We're then able to ingest all of that data automatically, flowing into our platform, ingesting into our platform, automatically setting up those various comparisons and conducting analysis. And if you think about those comparisons, they might be things like how do season ticket holders speak and respond versus, a one-off match day ticket holder, or how do executive box fans speak versus regular seat fans. But you might also want to compare this over time. So week on week, month on month, season on season, even game on game, to see those fluctuations in fan experiences as time goes by. We then track all of that great data longitudinally. So again, over time, producing reports and visualizations alongside a really rich comparative analysis. On the right-hand side, you can then see kind of how those findings are fired out. So we're able to then fire these findings out into dashboards like Power BI, Tableau, or even a more traditional method that we've seen a lot of success with more recently. And it seems a little bit outdated, but actually it's super effective for kind of the higher up in your organization that you go, is email reporting, right? A lot of execs don't have the time to dig into a really complicated or a really number heavy dashboard. Instead, they just want to know what are the three things I need to know off the back of this game or this survey. What do I need to know? So what we found is that pulling all of that into an automated email output that can be sent out to a list of stakeholders has proved to be really quite effective in recent years and months. So going back to our earlier schematic, if we now layer in the use of relative insight alongside a customer journey map, it's no longer just a visual representation. Instead, what we're now doing is we're collecting distinct data from distinct touch points throughout your customers' interactions with your organization. We're then able to chop and break that down into specific sections, analyze it at scale while also digging into the nuance and tell you specifically what is going on at each stage of your customer journey map. So, for example, we might see that when a fan signs up for a premium membership, they love the personalized welcome that they receive, but they then have struggles or issues with accessing their tickets, for example, or managing their bookings. You're then able to arm the relevant teams within your organization to take action and drive that positive fan experience. Address those issues that you're finding at each individual stage, and that then leads to increased loyalty and repeat ticket purchases, for example. So, speaking of building incredible fan experiences, I'd like to introduce Greg from the Arizona Sun Devils, who'll be taking us through a real life example of how all of this has come to life over the past few months.
Thank you, Zach. So my name is Greg Emmons over at Arizona State with Sun Devil Athletics. Been here for just over 7 years. We've been working with Relative Insight just over a year. Started last football season with us, and walk you guys through what our journey looks like. So to give you a little bit of background, we were using just Qualtrics, which we'll walk through in a minute here. But we were in that manual tagging stage. So so to walk through what we utilize, we house all of our reporting in Tableau. And we surface those insights through a reporting hub. It updates fairly live pretty much every 4 hours. And that's how we're surfacing our insights to our key stakeholders. Qualtrics is our survey provider. We have over 12,000 survey submissions just from our post-game and postseason surveys in the last year. And so Qualtrics is conducting that for us. It's storing that data, and we're sending that data to Relative Insight. But Qualtrics still holds a really strong place for the quantitative analysis, whether that's our 1 to 5 scoring, whether it's quick breakdowns and segments for us. But where we utilize Relative, as Zach just mentioned, is a lot of that parsing through that data, ingesting it, reading what the topics that are being brought up, and we're pulling those segments over from Qualtrics into Relative so we can break down what's most important to our season ticket holders, to our fans that are spending significant amounts of money, to people that are donating to the program, or even just fans that have come to just that one game. Often they actually have great insight because they're coming to lots of games throughout different sports or different teams. So we'll move forward there. And then what we'll walk through here is kind of that quick overview. So our goal when we were talking with Relative Insight, as well as others, was how do we improve that fan experience? And the reason we really wanted to focus on this and make this our goal is we know that the better the fan experience, the more likely a fan is to return to a game. So the way that we measure that, as Zach mentioned, is that NPS. So we ask the question on every single survey that we send, what's your likelihood to recommend coming to another Sun Devil Athletics event to a friend? So we rate that 1 to 10. Our fans that are 9s and 10s are the ones that are always coming back. Those ones that are sevens and eights, we've got a little work to do. And then those ones that are six and below is where we start to have to see, are there dramatic changes that we need to make to improve their experience? So we measure that again in every single survey. And one of the things I sure we'll talk about later, but the amount of time that we've been able to save with relative from having to go through and tag all those questions so we know why that NPS is lower really comes through with knowing what our fans are talking about. So it used to take us a whole day, if not more, to go through a football or men's basketball or hockey survey and tag just to know what our fans are talking about, not even know whether it's significant to their NPS. And what we wanted to walk away with from the survey as a whole was, okay, we did really well at X, Y, and Z in this game, but we know we have to focus on A, B, and C. A and B might only matter to our season ticket holders, but they're the ones that are going to be coming back and spending money every single year in every single game. And C matters to our suites or our single game. So that's where we're able to take those and build those actionable suggestions for our stakeholders. And yeah, I just mentioned there, our goal was how can we find the three areas pretty much from every game or every season that we can focus on and make a greater impact on our fans going forward. So we'll walk you guys through what that process looks like here on the next slide. This one's set up as a timeline. So just to take you from start to finish. So it even starts actually before our fans show up to the game. When they make a ticket purchase, we are receiving their email. We're knowing where they're sitting, what section of the stadium, and then we are able to match that data to find out what type of ticket buyer they are. So if Zach went and bought a ticket today, he would be a single game buyer for us. Unfortunately, Zach doesn't have season tickets living all the way across the world. But then when Zach scans in his ticket, all that data gets appended to his scan record, which means that it can go through our data matching process. We're looking to create one record for Zach, whether he uses a bunch of different emails or just the one every time he comes. And the reason that's important is we're actually creating a custom link for each individual fan. So we don't publicize that our surveys are anonymous or not anonymous, but we know exactly the section that someone sits in, what type of ticket holder they are, because we're able to embed that data into Qualtrics. Then we're sending a post-game survey email. That's going to every single fan that scans their ticket, regardless of whether they made the purchase or not. If we transfer a ticket to a friend or send it to someone else, they get the opportunity to provide their input, and we get the opportunity to learn a little bit more about what's important to that fan as part of their game and fan experience. We do that through Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And then when you click on that link, it takes you to that Qualtrics survey. That data is recorded within Qualtrics with each submission, and that's where it gets sent to Relative Insight. We use an SFTP flow because we send it multiple places, including Tableau. So that's where our reporting really comes into play. So we send everything to a Tableau dashboard. But as Zach mentioned before, we actually utilize that AI email reporting as well to get to our key stakeholders. However, we are also still manually reporting on our biggest events. We're doing that because we don't want to miss anything. We still want to have our hands in the data and continue to learn and be engaged with it. But it's usually pretty close to the exact same feedback and results. And then the last and probably most important piece is we're able to quickly realize what is statistically significant that our fans are talking about. And we're able to identify those responses, and we can make direct calls to our fans, emphasize with them that we've heard them. We can clarify questions or comments they made and make sure that we're truly listening first. And maybe if there's an opportunity to inform or educate, we're taking that next step. They might not have known there's another entrance that's closer to where they park. They might not know where a bathroom is. Stuff that we can do, make those little details show to them. That way they continue to have a great experience. So we'll move forward to the next slide. Yep. So this is just a quick sample of what our survey dashboard looks like. We started working with Relative Insight right after the 2023-24 football game against USC. So we were able to take Colorado and beyond to the right there. So you can kind of see that we're seeing a raise in our NPS over time. We were able to work with Relative and give a lot of our old survey data through there. And what that let us do was analyze it in mass for multiple games and multiple seasons. So they helped us get caught up. And then we were able to make some changes, which we'll walk through here later. The other great advantage that Zach mentioned is that heartbeat, whether it's the topics or emotions. So this is how we keep track of what our fans are talking about. So you can see here concessions over time continues to be one of the items that gets talked about a lot. We'll have things with our marketing and game presentation team, our operations team, usually items like parking or getting into the stadium. And you can even break these down in further detail. So we do that regularly, and that's what tells us what's important to our fans. So if we know our most important fans, like our season ticket holders, are talking about something and they're all talking about it, then it's something we need to act on and at least recognize that there's an issue that we can go on and fix down the road. Go ahead there, Zach. Perfect. So this is probably our biggest win was what we changed headed into this season. So we focused based on our Qualtrics and Relative Insight data on 3 items. We know we needed to provide more concessions value and variety. We needed to give more value to our parking, and we needed to touch on the speed of concessions. So what we went ahead and did, and there's a whole press release on it if you want to read it in more detail, I'll summarize it quickly, is we needed to provide more value concessions as that was impacting a lot of our season ticket holders and a lot of our single game fans because Phoenix the area in Arizona is a diverse population, and we want to make sure that an Arizona State athletics sporting event is open to everybody. And that's something that the university charter actually calls out specifically, is that Arizona State is an inclusive institution to anyone. So we have value opportunities at a tailgate now. They're $4 or less for beers and burgers. We've got value concessions inside the stadium as well. We added a item of the game. That way there was one unique item that was going to be unique every single game, whether it was an alligator po' boy or burnt ends barbecue. We were able to work with the university and our parking services to cut the lots that were not directly next to the stadium pricing in half. And we were able to add more grab and go stations across the stadium. That way a fan can grab what they want, put it on the little payment counter, swipe their card, and move on and be done. So the reason that we changed these items was our fans with the lowest scores talked about these 3 areas the most. And it also had overlap with what our most passionate fans cared about. Our most passionate fans probably would still have come to the games, but now we're raising that experience. And if you went back and look at that chart, our football game score, that NPS score, is 4 of the higher ones that we've ever had. So not only are we making a big impact on their likelihood to return and recommend to friends, we're seeing more ticket sales, which has helped with the team winning, but our fan score and that fan experience is higher than it's ever been for Sun Devil football. So we can go on to the next one there, Zach. So yeah, the biggest impact right here is going to be that those little details that we're able to change are making big moments for our Sun Devil fans. That's something our athletic directors taken a lot of pride in, is how can you create those little details or fix those little details. That way, when someone walks away from the game, they're not necessarily remembering the final score. They're remembering that platform that we created for our student athletes to share. So whether it's Cam Scatabo at Sun Devil football, people remembering that he scored a bunch of touchdowns and that they had a great time at the game, not that they're remembering, oh, this was a terrible part of my fan experience, or the team didn't do well, or maybe even if the team did well, the only thing they remember is that final score. We want to create that inclusive and holistic fan experience that they're remembering, hey, I had a great time at the game. Concessions were easy to get to. It was seamless to get in. Maybe there's a little bit of a line, but you're going to expect that when you have a sellout, stuff like that. So we always are trying to improve those scores in each area. And as a result of what we've been doing with Relative Insight and Qualtrics and Tableau, we've had four of our highest ever NPS scores for football. We've been able to survey more and more events. So by saving that 2 to 6 hours for each survey, we're able to survey all of our volleyball games, a bunch of women's soccer games, men's basketball, football, women's basketball, baseball, softball. So we're really starting to learn more and more about all of our fans across the board and not just one or two sports that we were focused on before. So I think the biggest other improvement that we've seen is our NPS is going up across the board for each sport. So we're going from having what they would call good events to excellent or world-class events, and we're doing that while we're tripling the amount of surveys that we've sent out in the past year. So I'll send it back to Zach here.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Greg. I mean, that's super, super insightful. I'm sure I'm speaking for all the attendees. It's really nice to see that kind of the, I guess the application and the methodology come to life in a real world example. Just before we head over kind of to the general Q&As, one of the questions I had for you, and this might be helpful for the attendees that maybe aren't in the world of sport, but if you could talk to us a little bit about how enhancing that fan experience directly contributes to the success of ASU or of a sports team in general, whether that's financial, reputational, or something else, that would be really great.
Yeah, so I think there's two things, a couple things to touch on here. Two things right off the bat that come to mind is we see a lot of correlation between our season ticket renewals and the self-described NPS that our fans give. So this is the first year that we have surveyed every single football game. So we'll be able to really start to dive into that even deeper. But even looking at the past 3 to 4 years, we know that someone's likelihood to recommend season tickets to a friend correlated directly with their willingness to renew and when they renewed. So that's the first part of it. And then I think the next piece of it is we're now able to get a really quick evaluation on our event. So our survey gets sent out Sunday morning from a Saturday game. It goes out again through a customer journey a couple days later if a fan doesn't open it. And what that lets us do is a day after that second send, we've probably got 80 to 90% of the responses we're going to get. We're able to turn around an evaluation of the text information in an hour versus a whole nother day or two or three or four, depending on how many people responded to that survey. And what that's letting us do is take those insights and what matters to our fans to our operations meetings, allows us to adjust our marketing email for the next game or that know before you go email that you get when you go to a game or a concert, and maybe say, hey, our parking wasn't perfect last game. We can actually give very specific instructions to those fans that had an issue because we know what lot they parked in, where they entered the stadium, and when they scanned in. We can remind them to get there earlier. We have even sent text messages to fans saying, hey, just a reminder, parking opens 7 hours before. That way they remember that they can get there super early, do their tailgate, do their pregame, whatever it might be. Because and the impact of that on our reputation is luckily we've had an athletic director that's fully bought in on improving the fan experience. He's a champion for it, both in public and in our offices. And that helps our sales and marketing teams sell the fan experience. You can't always sell team performance because you don't know whether you're going to be good or bad, and it can change like that. But what you can do is make that fan experience special. And we really focus on that on the sales side and the marketing side. That way, we can control what we can control. That's not between the lines. And that lets our fans enjoy the game regardless of how the team's doing.
Brilliant. Nice. I think that's a great way of kind of rounding off our section and all makes perfect sense, right? If you're building these great experiences, is really kind of engaging experiences, then naturally more people are going to want a season ticket. Those that already have a season ticket are going to want to renew. And the fact that you're able to very quickly address the issues almost live, practically live, contributes towards kind of maintaining those high scores and high satisfaction scores. So that's really great to hear. Cool. Well, we're going to open up the floor to general Q&As. So I'm going to take a look to have a look here. So one of the questions we've got is, So how well does Qualtrics, Relative Insight, and Tableau work with each other? So I can take kind of the first stage of that. So in terms of the way that Relative Insight would work to ingest that data, we're all pretty flexible. So the way it would work is either we set up an SFTP, an API integration, even something as simple as a Dropbox link, so that if your organization are pulling in your Qualtrics results in an Excel file, whatever format you have, you can just drag and drop into a shared file, a shared folder, and it automatically uploads to our platform. That's one option. Or as I mentioned, an API could just automatically grab that data, drop it into the platform, and then all of the automated analysis takes place. In terms of Tableau, Greg, it would be good to kind of hear how that integration works on your side.
Yes. So right now we send everything from both Qualtrics and Relative Insight either through an API or into a essentially a Google Doc that Tableau reads live. So what that lets us do is update it with each submission. And then when we pull down our email report for the stakeholders, we're also pulling down what that heartbeat looks like of those topics over time and updating our Google Sheet. I do know that Ollie and team over at Relative have a Tableau integration that works really well. It's not quite perfect with how we have our setup, which is why we're doing that, but they're working with us actively to continue to improve it. So it works really well for us. It's been something that helps speed up everything on our end.
Brilliant. Cool. And then another question we've got here, and this might be one more so for you, Greg. So, how much faster is it to use analytics software when compared with doing it manually in the past?
Yeah, so I think this question's probably talking about the tagging and going through and finding the topics and the emotion or whether it's positive or negative behind the topics. So our process on a small survey used to take well over 2 hours, and that was only for maybe a couple hundred or 100 results. It was reading through them, tagging what topic, is it positive, is it negative, kind of scoring on a +2, -2 is what we used to do. And it took over 8 hours for some of our football surveys where we're getting 1,000 plus responses. And that's before you go in and actually read for content or try to figure out, oh, are all these people sitting in the same area? Are these people all season ticket holders? Where do they all park? So using relative insight has sped up that process. Like I said, I think we're turning them around in about an hour. And that's still with me reading through a lot of what relative insight tags. So we're able to really pull that up correctly and find out, hey, this is all the things that are related to parking. They're all in one bucket. I can read through them and figure out, hey, is this a good thing, a bad thing? And we can actually share those quotes with our stakeholders very quickly without having to do any additional work. I just tag them and you can download it into a PowerPoint and you can send it off. So it's a great tool for us. Probably saving us at least 7 hours a week in a football. So that's a whole day's worth of work that we can now spend our bandwidth doing something else.
Nice. We've got another question, kind of more of a follow-up question here from Nathan. So the question is, are you automating your scan data into Qualtrics for your personalized links, or is that a manual process that happens during or after the game?
Yep, excellent question. Thanks, Nathan. So one of the things that you can do with we're a Ticketmaster school, so you can send that data directly to Qualtrics. We want it to go through that golden record management process and hygiene process for us. So we do not send it directly after the game. We'll wait overnight that so that process can run, and then we will manually, or it's not even a manual process. It's essentially a joining of two tables in SQL. We'll bring those two tables together. That way we can embed all the data we want on a fan to push into Qualtrics, which eventually sends it to Relative once they submit. So that is something that happens the morning after the game. Takes 20 minutes and you just are hitting a button and hitting download. You just pick the game you want, download it. We upload it into Qualtrics if we don't have it set up already for that game in advance, which you can do. You can already set them up to send an SFTP to Qualtrics and create those links. So we have that set for a lot of the games we know we're going to survey. Sometimes we add one here or there if we want an insight, maybe something happened at a game and we need to learn if it impacted the NPS for our fans.
Brilliant. And then we've got another question here. I've got some thoughts, but it might be worth you, Greg, answering it first. So, how hard has it been to almost decouple fan NPS and fan experience from being solely about the result of the game on the field?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the things that we've luckily been able to almost train our fan base to do is separate those two. We're asking them what are their likelihood to come back, how was parking, how was your ingress to the game, how was your egress to the game, what was the game atmosphere like, what was the concessions like, and they've done a really good job. And we've got to applaud our fans here because they give good feedback. So they've done a good job of separating those. It also helps that we started this when we were not winning because our fans were not not worried about the game result. They knew we weren't very good. But what our marketing team has done a great job of, and our sales and our service teams do a great job of, is that outreach. So we are putting on like at the beginning of the season, we had a press release of the changes we made, and we've done this for 3 to 4 years now. We've done in our survey when we send it, we say, "Hey, this is the changes we made this year based on survey results. We want to know what changes you want us to make for this year and next year." So I think a lot of it comes down to the wording of how we're asking for that content, and also that our fans now have a strong trust that we're reading those. They know that if they say something, they're going to get feedback from their customer service rep if it's an important topic. They know that we're going to make those changes and highlight what changes we made and why we made those changes. So I think that level of transparency from our marketing team, from our athletic director, from everyone involved has gotten our fans to ignore the game result. Now, obviously, if it's a sellout, they know there's going to be more lines. They know that, and we know that. So you take that with that consideration. But they have done a great job of omitting what's been on the field, and that wasn't the case at first. It took some growth to get there and a lot of transparency with our fans to get there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's all about kind of how are you wording your survey to make sure that you're asking for them, you're asking your fans to give you a response not based on the actual result on the field. Another thing that I would say for that question in particular is we do this with some of our other sports customers that have kind of already been through a full kind of season from start to end. Is at the end of the season we're able to analyze all of the games that were won, all of the games that were lost, and either look at them against each other or in isolation. So that's also another way to, I guess, cut out, the results on the field. If you analyze all the games that were won and they're still talking about expensive concession or they're still talking about parking issues, that might even hold even greater weight. Um, so that's one there. I think possibly the final question, one of the last questions we've got here is how effective is relative insight for determining sentiment? Does it categorize comments as positive or negative or more granular than that? So I can start off with this one. So our software can tag or categorize comments as positive or negative. Now, naturally, one of the issues with that is what do you do if someone says, the parking was so bad, but I loved the hot dogs, right? Is that going to show up as neutral? Is that going to show up as positive or negative? So instead, what we do at Relative Insight, or in addition, what we do at Relative Insight is we use emotive topics. So that might be things like frustration, love, happiness, worry, shock, surprise. So we use kind of more detailed semantic topics to break out and work out those kind of sentiments or feelings within the words that your fans use. And Greg, I believe you guys even use some of those emotions to kind of track across each game, don't you?
Yep, across each game and specifically with our season ticket holders or fans that have multiple games. So trying to gauge where their heads at throughout the year. I do think, like Zach just mentioned, there's often a wide array, and that's also where we'll see some of that game result slip in. Less so in the NPS score, but more in how excited they sound or how demoralized or frustrated they might be.
Yeah, definitely. I believe that's all of the questions. If anyone's got any more, feel free to type them in now. We'll give you a couple of seconds. But to round up, I think that's been really, really insightful. Hopefully, everyone's learned something new. Those of you in the world of sports, I think a lot of this is super, super relevant to you, whether you are running a fan engagement survey program, if you are surveying your fans or not. There's a lot of teachings and learnings that you can get from running a process like that. And for those of you that perhaps aren't in the sport world, this is all super applicable to any customer engagement, customer surveying that you guys are doing. Um, but I don't believe we have any more questions, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Greg. It's been great to chat with you. And yeah, hope that everyone over in the US has a great Thanksgiving when it comes around tomorrow.
Thank you, Zach.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone.